When I was about a 20-year-old woman, I subleased a friend's place for the summer. It was one of those houses built for college kids, in a subdivision that's all college students. The house had 4 bedrooms. I rented 1 bedroom, but the other roommates were out of town for the summer as well. So I was alone. Coincidentally, one of my friends had a younger sibling who needed to find a home for her rescue pit bull for the summer. I had boxers all my life and always loved pit bulls. I'd always been curious about them. To this day, I'm so glad I had that dog. I swear she saved me and possibly my life. I'm obsessive about 2 things because of who I am as a person: cleaning and locking doors and setting alarms when I leave or when I'm alone. That meant I was locking and setting the alarm a lot that summer because I was alone. The first night I had the pit bull. Her name was June. I was a little nervous, if I'm being honest. I didn't know until my friend dropped the dog off, but my friend's sibling had just rescued this pit bull less than a month ago. Clearly, I should have asked more questions. I was nervous because this dog was a bit apprehensive about me and fresh out of the shelter or rescue, wherever my friend's sibling found her. This was clear by the way she interacted with me in the home surroundings. It was clear June had been abused. This dog had scars all over her body and, by the looks of it, had recently given birth. Also worth noting, June was hulking. This dog was absolutely jacked. I had rehabbed a dog before, so I felt I was up to the challenge. After all, I had the entire summer and it was just June and me. This house had those magnetic fob locks, a door at the front of the house which faced the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. There was also a door at the back of the house which faced a sort of alley where I parked my car. I locked any door anytime I used it, as well as the door to the bedroom whenever I went to sleep. I had June in the bedroom with me. There was an alarm on the house, but the girls that actually lived there, remember I was subleasing, never set it up and didn't have the desire to do so, which meant I was relying on the locks. Night 1, I got into bed and directed June to the comfy plush bed I had put together for her. I had laid her toys in it, with the super soft blankets in the works. I guess June decided, nah, because the next thing I knew she was in the bed with me, facing me with her head, and all those teeth, a few inches from mine. I barely slept because I was so scared I would accidentally roll onto her foot or something, scare her and end up with my face eaten off. Yes, I know this is silly, but it's what was going through my mind as I lay awake, staring at this massive absolute unit of a dog. Night 2, same thing except I fell asleep. I woke up the next morning to June staring directly into my soul. We were bonding. Night 3, we spent the evening watching movies and snuggling. I shared my pizza crusts and she was definitely feeling the love, because she finally let me scratch her belly and started to act like a puppy, and less like a recently released inmate. Morning after night 3, I woke up and it was still really early in the morning, around like 6:30 or 7. I usually got up around 9 a.m. for my class at noon. As I was coming out of the sleepy stupor trying to get my bearings and understand why the heck I was awake so early, I noticed June. June was absolutely snarling at the bedroom door, body slamming the door, sniffing while snarling the base of the door, lunging over and over at the handle of the door. It was absolutely terrifying, but I wasn't afraid of her. I quickly realized something or someone was right outside my bedroom door and was jiggling the door handle which I had locked. I do live in Texas, so I grabbed my 12-gauge shotgun that I kept under my bed and racked it. It was a very, very old and very loud gun. When I racked the gun, everything became very quiet. I said, "Who's there?" The random guys replied, "Maintenance, we're maintenance. We didn't mean to scare you. We're here to fix the dishwasher." I said I didn't put in a maintenance request, and the dishwasher is in the kitchen on the first floor. They responded, Yeah, we were told no one was here. I'm training a new guy and thought I'd show him what most of the houses look like inside. At this point, June was losing her ever-loving mind, and I was armed, kind of annoyed that these idiots had woken me up so early. Then it dawned on me. I had deadbolted the doors. Maybe the maintenance people had some way to bypass the deadbolts. I honestly don't know. This was a time when magnetic fobs were kind of new, or new to the apartments near campus anyway. I should have been more scared, but I could tell these guys were scared out of their minds between hearing the monster on the other side of the door and my gun racking. So I cracked the door a smidge, just enough for them to see the gun, June foaming at the mouth, and so that I could get a look at their uniforms to confirm whether they were real servicemen or not. Weirdly enough, they didn't have on any uniforms. There were 3 men. 2 looked like they'd had it rough, maybe in their early 40s. The other guy was in his mid-20s. All 3 men were dirty, like they'd been sleeping outside maybe. The clothes appeared clean, but they had not seen a shower in a hot minute. I told them to leave or I would open the door and let June out. I told them I would call the front office and clear this up, but for now they needed to leave. Sure enough, all 3 men turned around and left my house. Once the men left, I checked the doors and the back door was unlocked. I had checked it the night before. There was no way I had forgotten to lock it. I called the front office the minute it was open at 8 a.m. They said they hadn't dispatched any maintenance men that day and asked me for a description of the men. I'm not sure if they were ever caught, but I certainly hope so. I have never been so scared in my life. I had used my gun when hunting, but never once pointed it at a person. In that specific housing complex, at least 5 women were attacked in the weeks before this encounter, so I was definitely on edge. I kept June the entire summer and would have tried to adopt her as we definitely bonded, and I knew she had my back. I felt so safe with her. But the place I was moving into wasn't a place she would be happy, as it didn't have a yard and it was really small. To this day, I'm convinced June saved me from something truly horrible. To the supposed maintenance men, may we never meet again. It's been long enough that I'm ready to tell the story. Last year, I was dog sitting for my aunt. The dog is small, sweet, and a little skittish. I had work most of the week, so I was just living in the house for the time being. It is a nice house, not big enough to feel empty if you are alone, but not small enough to feel cramped. The only rooms I used were the kitchen, bathroom, living room, and the guest bedroom. My last day of work that particular week was a double shift. I was excited because after this, I had 2 days off. I planned to use them to introduce the dog to RuPaul's Drag Race. I usually try to keep good spirits for a double shift because, regardless of the time and annoying customers, extra money is always needed. My old job was as a barista and cashier. Mornings are always busy and nights are slow. On the weekends, people are more concerned with coffee and breakfast than anything else we may have to offer. I was having a nice time actually, because this day was turning out to be not as hectic as the previous ones that week, one even involving a small fire. As the morning rush line was dwindling, the limited tables in the restaurant came into view and I started people watching. As I slowly scanned the customers eating bagels and reading the paper, my eyes met a man at a laptop. He had long, dirty hair and a bit of stubble. He stared at me with a little too much intensity. I wondered if he found my people watching rude, so I decided to clean and restock instead. It did not take long for a line to reform, so I returned to my register. Once again, after the line died down, I could see the few tables in the front. The man was still there and he was still staring at me. Every now and then he would look at his computer and then back to me. It almost felt like he was looking right through me, or like he could see every part of me. It felt so uncomfortable that I went and cleaned in the back of the restaurant out of his sight. After the next rush, I took my break and sat far away from the man. He was out of my sight and I was out of his. When I came back from my break, the man was gone. My manager asked if I had interacted with him at all. I told her about him making eye contact with me, but that nothing else really happened. She told me that the man had been watching porn on his laptop, and she had asked him to leave. So that was weird enough. This man had been watching porn and staring at me. I really wish this was where the story stopped. Hours passed and the rest of the day was entirely normal, despite me and a few female coworkers feeling a slight edge. We were in the process of closing, which is actually a process I really enjoy. I am one of those weirdos that likes to clean. We were well in and I was almost done with my assigned jobs when my manager came up to me again. She informed me that the man had found his way back into the restaurant at some point, and she found him hiding in a back corner. She chased him out by threatening to call the police. She knew that earlier in the day he seemed to be paying attention to me. She said I could finish up whatever I wanted or needed to, but afterwards she strongly advised me to get home as soon as possible. She also offered to walk me to my car. I took both offers and quickly got my things together and clocked out. My aunt's house was not far from work. It was a 5-minute drive at most, which was helpful because then I did not feel crippling anxiety for much longer. I got in the house and after triple checking that I had locked every door, I got into my pajamas. But unsurprisingly, I was not ready to sleep yet. Now was the time to introduce the dog to RuPaul's Drag Race. I went into the living room. The living room consists of a couch, 2 chairs, a television, a window, and the front door. Unfortunately, the porch light was broken and the window had no curtains. That had me a little stressed, but I was willing to take that over the only other television in the house, which was the one that exists in the scary basement. Facing the basement television included having my back to a sliding glass door facing the very dark woods. No thanks. I was setting up the television when the dog started growling. I really did not think much of it. As I said, the dog is skittish, so he growls and barks all the time. I was not looking at him. I was muttering, "Shush," and figuring out how to work the television. The dog did not stop and started to get louder, so I finally put down the remote and turned to face the dog. I froze. The dog was barking at the window and there was an outline of a man at the window, the exact same build as the one at the restaurant. I screamed and luckily that was enough for the man to run away from the window. I stood there frozen for a while. The dog had calmed down, but I hardly felt safe. So I went into the kitchen, grabbed a big knife, and did what any responsible adult would do. I called my mommy. She did not advise calling the police. My mom never does, and instead came and spent the night with me. I told my aunt. I spent the rest of my time dog-sitting, clutching the knife any time I slept or took a shower. My aunt also gave me permission to have one friend stay with me every night. Nothing else ever happened. I never even saw the guy come into work again. A part of me wishes I knew who he was, where he went, or what he even wanted with me. I am glad he was a coward and that all it took to scare him off was my scream and an extra small dog. Let's not meet again, stalker guy. Who watches porn in a sandwich shop anyway? Hi, I don't really post much, but I was reminded of one freaky time when I was 16, and a creepy man approached me while I was walking home. By the way, I'm now 18, and I thankfully moved about an hour away from my old house a couple of months ago. I don't think I'll ever fully recover from this encounter, but I definitely learned from it. So on the day this happened, I was really upset and had left college early because of mental health concerns at the time. I'm in the United Kingdom, so college starts at 16. While I was walking home, this man who looked like he was in his 30s approached me. I'm not exactly sure how old he was, but I know he was definitely not 20 or 16. He wore a dark puffer jacket and carried a weird gray bag, kind of like those family holiday bags you take camping. He also had a strange cap. Unfortunately, my brain blocked out any other details of what he was wearing, so that's all I can describe. There might be missing parts of this awful incident because my brain tends to block out traumatic things, but I'll try my best to share what I remember. Anyway, he asked me how I was doing, and me being the gullible teenager I was, I assumed he noticed I was upset and genuinely cared about my feelings and was just being nice. I am a very anxious person because of past incidents of being followed and harassed, but for some reason, I didn't feel weirded out at first. So, being the polite person I was, I took out my earphones and replied with a simple, "Oh, I'm okay, how are you?" I figured maybe he was just a neighbor or someone I knew. I really hate myself for not thinking it was weird that he was wandering around in that outfit and approaching me on the street. Actually, thinking back, I found it strange that nobody else came outside. The area where this happened was between two rows of apartment buildings, but maybe whoever heard us was too scared to come out, or the situation was just too quiet. The conversation started casual until he asked me which college I went to. I would have answered truthfully anyway, but something inside me clicked because he was clearly staring at my bright green lanyard with my college's logo on it as he asked. That felt really suspicious. I was nervous because I wasn't sure if I should lie or not, but the answer was basically on display for him to see. I ended up truthfully telling him which college I attended, which was obviously a bad idea. But what else could I do with the lanyard right there? I started to feel uneasy. I honestly just wanted to cry because I knew I couldn't take out my phone and call for help. Something inside me told me he might hurt me if I did. Right after he asked if I wanted to come to his place, I stammered out a bad excuse like, "Oh, my mom really wants me to collect her shopping." He said it was okay and that maybe we could hang out another time. That's when a bell finally went off in my head. I was definitely in danger. I didn't know this man, I didn't know if he was a neighbor, and he was approaching me while I was alone on a quiet street. I tried to walk away and make excuses, but he kept talking. I was getting frustrated, but I couldn't really do much because I was smaller than him and terrified at the same time. Finally, as the conversation was ending, he asked me where I lived. Thinking it was safest to lie, I pointed in a direction that didn't lead to my house. But he laughed and corrected my arm so it pointed right at my house. That really creeped me out because he said, "Don't lie, you always come from down there." That made me feel like he had been watching me for days. By that point, I shut down the conversation completely and told him my mom would be really mad if I didn't go home right away, since I should already be there. He smiled and watched me walk away before continuing to talk to himself. I was crying and calling my mom to let me in as soon as I got home. We live in a 3-story apartment building, and I told her what happened. Like most moms, she didn't really listen at first and went outside to confront him, which upset me a bit because it made him run away. By the time we called the police, they couldn't find him. On the neighborhood watch group, a few actual neighbors said they had fought off this same man hanging around the primary school behind the street where he approached me. That really grossed me out, especially since I'm pretty sure I told him I was 16 at the time. Unfortunately, my neighbors did not have any CCTV footage of him or the incident, except one lady who refused to give the footage to my mom, which was really frustrating. I am so thankful I never felt nice enough to agree to go to his house, and I'm thankful I never saw him again. What I'm not thankful for is that I still always feel like I'm being watched. I don't know if that's a trauma thing or normal, but I really hate it. Weird guy with the weird puffer jacket. Let's never meet again. I live in a regional city in Australia. It's relatively big, but once you leave the center of the city, it's pretty much all bushland and trees. When I was in year 3, around 7 or 8 years old, my school took all the students on a school camp to a campground 45 minutes out of town. It was a one-night trip, and we were all super excited. After a long day of archery, basketball, tennis, and all the other typical camp activities, we had dinner and went to bed. I distinctly remember laughing and messing around with all my friends before we all fell asleep around 11 o'clock at night. Now, the next part I had forgotten for years, until only recently it came back to me, and now it's the clearest part of my memory. I used to be terrified of the dark, and I would wake up multiple times during the night. This one time I woke up in my cabin at around 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember this clearly because I had a watch that was very special to me, and for some reason, looking at it and checking the time comforted me in the dark. When I woke up, I felt like something was off. Not wrong, just off. I looked around my cabin and saw nothing of interest, but then I was hit with an intense feeling to look out the window. The window was right next to my bed. Our room was on the second level of this cabin complex, so when you looked out the window, you had to look down to see the ground directly below. At first, I saw nothing. Just as I started to look away, something caught my eye. I could have sworn I saw something right below the window, almost out of sight if you were just looking straight ahead. I looked down and I saw someone. Not the average person, more like a tweaker. He was tall, maybe 6'3" or 6'4". His skin looked like he had just fallen hard on cement. He was covered in scrapes and grazes, and his hair had been completely buzzed off. He looked about 40 years old, but I think he might have been in his mid-20s, based on his very skinny build. He wore a dirty black hoodie and black jeans that looked like motorbike pants. He also wore what looked like a mix between a fedora and a cowboy hat. When I looked down, his eyes caught mine instantly. He was staring into the window. He didn't move his head when he saw me. No, he had been actively staring into that window before I was even there. He stared with such wide eyes, like he was straining all the muscles in his face to make his eyes pop out as much as possible. The second our eyes locked, I ducked back down and hid under the covers. I wanted to scream and yell and tell my friends, but I was so scared that I couldn't even move. I waited under those covers for what felt like hours until I felt safe. I slowly peeked out from the covers again and checked the window. He was still there. He had moved a little to the right, but he was still there, staring intently at my window. I didn't even get to become fully level with the window before I ducked out of sight again and went back under the covers whimpering. I'm not sure how, but I managed to fall asleep. When I woke up, it was light outside and all my friends were happily waking after their sleep. I checked the window again, praying he was gone, and luckily he was. I told my friends about it that morning, and they all laughed at me for having a nightmare. At the time, I think I believed it was just a bad dream. I forgot about it for 10 years, but when it came back to me the other week, I realized it couldn't have been a dream. Everything was so real. I have very weird dreams. I never have ones that actually make sense. My dreams always flow very strangely, So the absolute consistency of this memory is almost proof to me that it really happened. Also, I specifically remember lying under my covers for a long time, something I doubt would happen in a dream. I have no idea who was outside my window or what he was doing. I just hope that he isn't still doing whatever it was, because that look in his eyes told me that whatever he was doing, he wasn't messing around. I don't know what I saw, but I just wish I had an answer. This is my first post here. For story context, I am a 29-year-old male to female transgender person who presents as masculine for work-related things like rideshare driving. Basically, this means I don't generally get upset by people calling me he or him because, well, I don't pass. Anyway, I use both apps, Uber and Lyft, and usually I don't have any problems. The riders are generally pretty nice or quiet, and honestly, I enjoy giving rides. It is not a lot of money, but it is enough in between paychecks from my main job to be enjoyable when I can. However, as I was cruising off from a ride, I got a new request for like $20 to $30. Not uncommon, but sometimes that means it is far away. This one was only 45 minutes, so not too bad. Plus, money. So, I was driving to the pickup location, which was at a decently fancy Japanese grill and a somewhat run-down dispensary. I parked out of the way of traffic and hit arrive. 2 minutes passed and nobody showed up. 3 minutes, someone walked up and she came to my door. Here is where the scary stuff starts. She did not immediately open the door. She reached for the handle, sure. But then she leaned completely forward against my rear passenger door and laughed. She was laughing into the paint. Then she bent all the way backwards so that her legs were almost at a 45-degree angle with her torso. She opened the door, and apparently my last rider left something in the back seat. She stopped laughing and started snickering. I said, "Hi, are you rider's name?" in my forced masculine voice. In a creepily cutesy voice, she said, "Yeah, that be me. Someone done dropped a thing in your back seat, Mr. Uberman." I noticed and asked if she could keep it in the front seat with me so I could return it later. Oh damn, guess she must have left it on accident. She stared not at me but at the rearview mirror and said, "Ain't you gonna call her?" I told her I'll do it when a request comes in to return it like I usually do. Now, a quick aside to explain the characterization of this woman I have made so far. I am not going out of my way to be prejudiced. She legitimately spoke this way. Beyond just a country vernacular, she spoke as if she could not read well. As someone who's worked with people with traumatic mental disorders or people who were severely mentally disturbed or are neurodivergent as a volunteer, I try my best not to be annoyed or rude in these situations. Anyway, we headed off towards her destination, which was 45 minutes away. First red flag, because the others so far could have been just a rider being weird or drunk. She asked me to stop at a UPS store on the way. No big deal, right? Here's the issue. She did not specify which one, just the UPS. As I opened Google Maps to find the nearest one, she said, "Oh, you don't have to, but I have to get my friend out of jail. If I don't get this package, he's going to be there overnight." "Oh," I said, not understanding what the package had to do with jail, but playing along. "Well, it's just he's going to be there all night if we don't get him out. He's gonna kill somebody. He's in jail for killing." When I freaked out visibly but not audibly, she smiled and said, "Oh, we don't have to go there. Let's keep going back on the road. I know you Uber guys gotta make your money." Yeah, Uber drivers don't have a lot of money, do they? Weird pivot, but we kept going. And I nervously laughed and said, "Yeah, but I don't mind if you need me to stop." Wrong move. She kept staring at me from the rearview mirror every time I glanced back. We were on the highway before she said anything else. I like this car. What car is this? I told her. Oh, it's nice. You like it. You like this car. I nodded and said, oh yes, it's a nice car. And then she turned to the empty seat next to her and started arguing with the air. No, it's his car. No, I don't think he wants to do that. Stop it. I said, is everything okay? Oh, my friend just said this car is nice. Oh, I said. I was a bit freaked out but shrugged it off. People are weird, and it is not unusual for a grown woman to have imaginary friends. Mr. Uberman, do you think it is okay to steal if you have to? I just shrugged and said, I mean, what do you mean? Like if I was in a local grocery store and wanted bread, I should be able to take it, right? Especially if I work there. I shrugged again. I am not a thief, it's 'cause I need it. She turned around and yelled at my trunk. I got money, right, Mr. Uberman? I got a job, so I got money. She was getting visibly more agitated. Then she turned to the trunk again and said, What? No, you tell her to simmer down now, he's a nice man. And she went on a long rant about how she's not a vagabond and she has a job, so she isn't poor, but poor people like to pretend they're not poor. Switching from talking to the seat next to her to the trunk. Eventually, she smirked, which was kind of off-putting because she was missing teeth. Now, do I necessarily care if someone talks to themselves in a Lyft ride? No. I don't judge people, life is hard. But when her imaginary friends start to sound like they want me to die. Yes, I do care, I don't like being alive, but I'm not going to let someone else decide that. Then I was driving and keeping to myself. She smirked in the rearview mirror and said in a scarily soft voice, Aren't you sleepy? Are you hungry, honey? They say you're really sleepy. Do you like boba? I was now gripping the steering wheel and avoiding eye contact. Oh no, I'm okay. Thank you for the offer, though. I'll pay if we stop, she said in her sing-song voice from earlier. Let's stop. Maybe you could even pull over and nap for a bit. She was baring her teeth at this point, and I was internally screaming that I wanted this ride to be over as soon as possible. But $20 is $20. So we kept driving. Well, you killed her, so it is what it is, she said randomly to my trunk. So, new information, she was talking to dead people. Holy spaceballs. So, I was now even more determined not to stop. We got to a stop sign and she stared at the headrest and leaned forward. Oh, forgot to mention, all of this was happening while she was sitting directly behind me. She leaned forward and stuck out one bony finger and poked my shoulder. How does your body feel, Mr. Uberman? You sure you don't want something to eat? I could feed you if you just pull over somewhere. So it was like the 10th time she tried to get me to stop. Then she said, He's sleepy, ain't he? He's going to kill someone if he doesn't get some sleep. Someone's gonna die. He's got two choices, he chooses. I asked who was going to kill someone. She looked aware and got an angry face. Nothing, no one. So eventually, after being death stared at and her imaginary ghost friends talking about robbing and or killing me, we got to her destination and she got out. Thank you for being so patient. Make sure you don't forget to eat, she said with deliberate pauses, then came around to my window and smiled against the glass. I drove home and didn't drive for Lyft for a week. So to the lady who kept trying to get me to pull over to sleep with her in the car, let's not meet.